Hello and welcome to this special episode of Kokx News. I am Stephen Kokx. Today is Wednesday, September 10th. We wanted to do this follow-up episode to a previous show we did on the counter-revolutionary traditional Catholic movement and the 5 guiding principles that we see for this movement going forward. Of course, this is a coalition of the willing. There's nothing inherently united about what we're seeing in the traditional reactionary space right now that's responding to Trad Inc. There's been many people in this space for decades before this show ever came along, and so we really, in many ways, are just joining this movement that really is fighting for the pre-Vatican II faith, as it always was. So today, I want to do a follow-up episode and talk about how the traditional movement has actually gone liberal. All right. Now, what does that mean? How is that even possible? How can trads become liberal? Or how can they, they say, well, we're fighting for the Latin Mass, Vatican II is an issue, but, maybe not throw it all out. Okay, there's some things that are in there. I'd like to see just like 1 or 2 paragraphs that they think is actually just so great and helpful that occurred at the council. I'm not sure. I'd love to see some examples of that. It was the French Revolution that was condemned by the popes at the time in toto, right? It was Martin Luther who was condemned by Leo X in toto, right? Everything. He said he was a liar, an opponent of the faith. And this, despite having a few things Luther did say admirably about our mother, and he kept some aspects of the faith, but corrupted the rest of it. So, this idea, a little leaven really destroys the entire batch, right? So why are we wanting to just salvage Vatican II? It seems to me the church has always condemned, carte blanche, those sorts of events. It's a revolutionary coup, obviously, is what it was. So what are we trying to cling to, right? In any case, we're getting off the topic here. I want to go back to, again, our subject for today. And like before, we got some slides. And today's show, we're going to title How Traditionalists Have Embraced Liberalism. This is part of our ongoing Crisis in Tradition series. We need to understand that this crisis is now at a point where we're not just talking about a crisis in the church, but actually one in tradition, which makes this all the more dangerous because it's now infiltrating and affecting those who have, at least for many years, fought against and exposed a lot of these heresies coming out of the Vatican. And now we're just seeing that they want to just be sheepdogs the entire time, which is very, very sad and very disappointing. In any case, let's get on with today's show. Forewarning, if you haven't seen the movie Lord of the Rings, Peter Jackson's edition, the one released in the early 2000s, some of this might be a little confusing today, but if you have, it'll make perfect sense. I'll do my best to explain it. Again, going off the slides, very helpful images. So if you're listening on your cell phone or you're driving or something, you might want to actually watch this episode on a desktop so you can actually see the visuals. It's going to be very helpful in that regard. So if you've seen the movie Lord of the Rings, this is the city of kings, the city of Minas Tirith in Middle Earth. And this is where the king of Gondor, the king of the kingdom of men, resides. This is his the White City, in other words, is what it's called. And you could say that this is similar to the church, the Catholic Church itself. This is where the king, in other words, traditional Catholicism, has reigned. The faith itself has been in the church since Christ founded it. No king, no pope, in other words, has led souls astray into hell with faith, in terms of faith and morals, in their teaching ability. So we can say that the city itself, again, this is sort of like heaven on earth, right? The city of God versus the city of man. This is the city of God on earth. This is the church. Traditional Catholicism is the king of the church. He has the right to occupy the throne. Error has no rights. Error is driven out of the church. Heresy is driven out and condemned and anathematized. Okay? Important start to what we're talking about here. Now, Minas Tirith was set as a target by the Orc army, by the armies of Mordor, by the armies of Saruman, and they launched an attack coming out onto the White City. And you could say this is what happened at Vatican II. This is what happened at Vatican II. The modernists gathered together, finally fed up after being censured and condemned for over 100 years in the 1800s and early 1900s, from Gregory XVI with Memorare Vos to Blessed Pius IX in the 1860s, to Pope Leo XIII in the 1880s, St. Pius X in the early 1900s, and even Pius XII in the 1950s. Well, John the 23rd called the council, and they waged war on the church and on traditional Catholicism, the king, right? And here are again some of those figures: St. Pius X, Blessed Pius IX, Gregory. And then at the council, of course, Archbishop Lefebvre, French archbishop, founder of the SSPX in 1970. If you're a good historian, you might know who the other two bishops here are. That's Bishop de Castro Meyer and Bishop Segaud, who were Brazilian anti-communist, very traditional clergy who attended the council and fought alongside Archbishop Lefebvre in the conservative group of council fathers. Okay, so they are there defending the city. They are defending the church and traditional Catholicism, the king, which in this instance that is King Aragorn. Right. All right. So who are the enemies? Who are those who are waging war? Let's put a face to them. Well, most especially John the 23rd, who was reigning in the Vatican from 1958 until his death in 1963. Paul VI, again, John the 23rd, opened the council. Paul VI, 1963, was emerged from the conclave. Giovanni Montini is his name. He lived until 1977, I want to say. And then on the right, you have Yves Congar. He was a French Dominican, censored multiple times by the Vatican, just could not let go of his heresies, his new theology, his neo-modernist views. And he was one of the most influential experts at the council. So he went from literally being an outcast, censored by officially the church, by the Vatican, by the voice of the Holy Spirit, to basically being one of the most influential drafters of the council documents. So when you say, let's go back to the council, or let's just sift the things that were nice and bad, you're going through Yves Congar's documents. Okay, so again, a revolutionary figure, writing revolutionary documents and inserting small, nice little orthodox paragraphs here and there when Lefebvre and others fought to get those inserted, but most of it is just riddled with modernism. Again, you wouldn't eat a brownie that's laced with 1% poison at all, right? You stay away from it. You condemn it. You throw it out. Same thing with the council, right? So who were the foot soldiers behind these giant forces of the opposition, of the revolution that was waging war on the traditional faith and on the church? Well, here's just a left. Bronner, or excuse me, Father Ratzinger. That's eventually later Benedict XVI. He was a young man wearing a suit and tie, looking very non-clerical. You also had Karol Wojtyła. This was John Paul II. And then over here you have Gollum, who kind of looks like actually Yves Congar, if you kind of look at it, you know. So, how did they wage war? What did they wage war against? Well, again, let's read this quote here, because people forget this. They think Ratzinger, when he was a Benedict, was a friend of the traditionalists, right? He got more conservative as he got older. Wrong. Okay. Here's what he said back then, and he stuck with the revolution, right? Maybe he wasn't as far to the left, you might say, as Francis, but they're all part of the same revolutionary fight. He's just a more conservative one. So here's what Ratzinger said before the council. Gaudium et Spes was a revision of Pius IX. Gaudium et Spes was the document that the council approved at Vatican II. That again, he's saying reversed the teachings of Pius IX. So again, he waged war on Pius IX. Ratzinger also, quote, the church was excessively one-sided in its anti-modernist zeal. The cramped thinking of that period, once so necessary a line of defense, was really a narrow theological outlook that reflected an outmoded negative defensiveness. So here's this is his characterization, again, of the teachings of the church. Okay, I mean, the intellectual pride on display here, the gall to literally just say, oh well, that was all an aberration, right? The church basically was not being a very good church, right? And the popes at the time, well, they got carried away. We know better, right? This is always the attitude of revolutionaries and liberals who disdain the past. And so this is what they did, and they broke the rules at the council. We'll get into that in a future episode. At the very beginning, it was Cardinal Frings of Germany, who was Father Ratzinger's mentor, and he was actually Ratzinger was Frings's theological expert, his pariti. Frings stood up at the very first gathering of the council and demanded a vote on to delay the vote on who the members of the commissions at the council would be. And this was illegal. It was a breaking of the law. Right off the start, actually, Frings did mention to the presiding cardinal at the time, and the cardinal, if you go read Professor Roberto de Mattei's book on the council, this cardinal says, absolutely not, no way, I can't let you intervene, it's not on the schedule. Frings gets up anyway, says his revolutionary statement, we must delay. I will not serve the rules of this council. I'm going to do what I want. So he disobeyed. And that was just the first instance. That opened up, again, Pandora's box. That allowed the liberals to get their guys on the commissions. And that was just the start of it. I mean, there were other phrases that were inserted into these documents. There was, again, I think about, there was dozens of schemas prepared beforehand by the Roman Curia, the Holy Office, and others in the Vatican, especially Archbishop Lefebvre, who helped write those pre-conciliar documents that were to be discussed at the council. But the revolutionaries were fed up. They attacked every one of these documents. Oh, it's too scholastic. Oh, it's too juridical. It's too rigid. And then they had their own schemas prepared already in the Fulda conference in Germany, where you had a lot of the neo-modernists gather. They wrote their own documents, and so they inserted them later on, and basically complain to John the 23rd. When the 2/3 majority to throw out these documents was not met by the council fathers, they voted on these, and 2/3 majority was required to throw out a schema, and they didn't get that majority. And so they complained to John the 23rd, and John the 23rd, being a liberal, being a modernist, he said, yeah, okay, sure. I'll listen to your complaint. More than half of the council fathers, they opposed it, so we'll toss it all out. Again, breaking of the rules. No respect for the rules, no respect for decorum. They mocked Cardinal Taviani. They put him in the media. They used the Alinsky tactic, freeze the target, polarize it. Taviani was the most visible face of the traditional Catholic faith at the council, and that's why they had to discredit him. They put him on magazine covers. They called him old-fashioned. They said he was going back to the Council of Trent. All these sorts of attacks on his character, and that's how the media got involved in this fight too. So it's not just the clergy; it was their allies in the media as well. So here's another look at the attack. Here is Minas Tirith, the church itself, the city of kings, from another angle. Again, this relentless war that the modernists took towards the church and at the church. Again, we have the same figures here: Yves Congar, Paul VI, John the 23rd. And this revolutionary act has brought along others in the last 60 years. They've followed in the footsteps of those who marched before them. Again, we see on Twitter for the last several months and years, Joseph Strickland down there in Texas, formerly in Tyler, he's retweeting statements from John Paul in Veritatis Splendor. That's an encyclical that John Paul wrote almost every day, right? I'm not sure if His Excellency knows there's other popes than John Paul. I mean, we had over 250 of them, and many before the council. So maybe he can start quoting some of those. In any case, Bishop Robert Barron, Prevost, again, they follow in the revolution and are just marching towards what the liberals before them laid down and waged war upon. And this has had the effect of driving out of the church, of the visible structures, those who are traditional, right? Archbishop Lefebvre, excommunicated 1988. Bishop de Castro Meyer, again, he excommunicated 1988. Archbishop Vigano, excommunicated, 2024, I think it was, right? So anyone who stands up and tries to fight back, well, you're going to get in trouble by these revolutionaries. They don't want you around, right? That's their goal, is to keep you out. So again, let's return to our example. Here is the church pristine. Tradition is the king. And what happened at the council? Well, the king was driven out. Those who were in the offices are no longer there. And the king, or tradition, has been forced to live as a ranger, as a vagabond, as something outside the visible structures of the city. Again, if you've seen the movie Lord of the Rings, you know Aragorn, King Aragorn, lived as Strider, as a ranger out in the wilderness. You see him here at the Prancing Pony institution, at the Prancing Pony restaurant. And here he's living the shadows. You know, he's lost his way. He's not the king anymore, right? He's the king in exile. It's the same thing that's going on in the church. Tradition is driven out into these pockets of small resistance in these various little communities from where it should be in the church in Rome. And Father Clifford Fenton, who I've mentioned before, recognized what was happening at the council. Father Fenton was the dean at Catholic University of America in Washington, D.C. He wrote for and founded a journal called American Ecclesiastical Review. And he wrote for that from, I think, the early 30s, or maybe early 40s, until 1960s. He died a somewhat premature death in, I think, 1969. So he didn't live too long after the council to see its wreckage. But Father Fenton noticed, he went to the council as a paridi of Cardinal Ottaviani, the most staunch trad at the council itself. And he said this, he kept a journal about what he saw. And he said Yves Congar was a wild-eyed fanatic at one point in his journal. So he recognized the lunatics and the revolutionaries for what they were. But Father Fenton said this in his journal: the church is going to be very badly hurt by this council. And it has. This gathering seems to be entirely liberal. And it was. I had always thought this council was dangerous. It was started for no sufficient reason. This is going to mark the end of the Catholic religion. It would seem Christ is abandoning his church. So there you have it. Father Fenton basically kind of planting the seeds here for perhaps the Sedevacanist position. Again, the church, Christ is abandoning his church. He's leaving us with a false church, a false pope, usurpers on the seat, not legitimate heirs to the apostles. You know, you could extrapolate something like that from these remarks. And Father Fenton was very aware of what was going on and the modernism that permeates the documents, right? Although later Father Fenton did say some okay things about the council. We'll again cover that in another episode. But again, at the council, at the moment it was happening, Father Fenton was one of those who did recognize it. So again, coming back to our example, traditional Catholicism has been driven out, living as a vagabond outside the visible structures, excommunicated, right? That's what we hear. And we are now living under these modernist usurpers, right? We have John in there at the council, Paul VI afterwards, right? And all these others who came after them. Again, here's Paul II as Cardinal Ratzinger, Cardinal Wojtyła, Yves Congar, and Bishop Barron. And again, Barron even admits this. Here's a quote from Barron. He says, Yves Congar was silenced by the Vatican in the 1950s. Okay, so those of you who think, let's go back to the council, let's just rely on those documents. And I'm talking mostly to the conservatives now, right? Because again, there are trads who at least recognize there's major problems in those documents, right? It's the conservatives, the Novus Ordo bishops. Again, if you're going to the council, you're taking the bearings. You're taking your teachings from mostly Yves Congar and others who were silenced in the 1950s. So you're listening to men who were condemned officially by that church. FYI. In any case, Barron says, Congar proved to be one of the most influential theologians at the council. His chief opponents were the keepers of the traditional scholastic form of Catholicism. Now, that's not even a thing. There's no such thing as a scholastic traditional form of Catholicism. Catholicism is a divinely revealed religion. There is the faith, and then there are those who want to twist it and make it fit to their ideology and their personal views on how the faith should be. Okay, it's not like a flavor of ice cream where you can just say, "Oh, I'm going to support the modern form of Catholicism or the progressive form of Catholicism, and you're going to be a traditional form of Catholicism." No, there's only one faith here. All right, we need to get that straight. First of all, second, here is Barron admitting that Congar's allies were progressive council fathers, including Wojtyła and Ratzinger, and he says, more importantly, John Paul II had zero interest in reviving pre-conciliar conservatism. So he's admitting here, when John Paul was occupying the seat, he had no interest in reviving pre-conciliar conservatism. He had no interest in bringing back the actual king of the city to his rightful place. He wanted to keep out the traditional faith from coming back to the city, to the church, right? And this is, again, a quote that we quoted just the other day in our other show from Alistair McIntyre. He recently deceased, former professor at Notre Dame in South Bend, Indiana. And he said this: contemporary debates within modern political systems are almost exclusively between conservative liberals, liberals, and radical liberals. So we can say the same thing about what's going on in this imposter church, in this conciliar church. There are conservative liberals, like you might say Benedict. You could say he's not a conservative, obviously, but he didn't want to go as far on the revolution as some did, like Hans Küng. Okay, there are liberals and radical liberals. Okay, and again, you could say Francis Bergoglio was a radical liberal, right? He's on the other side of the spectrum. In any case, let's keep this analogy going. Again, if you've seen the movie, you know what this scene is. Okay, so this scene is an example of, we have Denethor. He is the steward of the kingdom of Gondor. Okay, he's not the legitimate king. He's just a caretaker of sorts. While you have at the top there the king's throne, because the king, again, is in exile. The king is Aragorn. He's living as a ranger. He was driven out of the city, right? He's not welcome back. And then you have here on the left Gandalf, and then Pippin is one of the hobbits. And Pippin comes along and he swears fealty to Denethor. He's this steward who's not the king. He's just sitting there in the place of it. And he's a bad king. He's not even he's not a king, but he's mismanaging the city. He's awful at it. He's scared when he sees the armies coming. And he says, "Flee for your lives." And he eventually loses his mind, tries to burn his son and alive. He had not died yet. So this is the situation we have. And you could say, in a sense, if the sedevacantist position is true, that the chair is empty, right? The king's chair, the chair for traditional Catholicism, the true popes, those who carried on the faith, Blessed Pius IX, St. Pius X, they've been driven out. Again, the modernists are in control. And you could say, again, here is Leo Denethor, a squatter, someone who is a so-called caretaker, but he's not the real king, right? We know that because he's not a trad. He's a modernist. He's sitting there, and he's not even again, Denethor lost his mind. And you could say that about these stewards, right, who are managing the conciliar institution, right, that's passed off as the Catholic Church. And what do we have? Well, we have lay people who call themselves trads, but they swear fealty to the modernist usurper, right? Here's Taylor Marshall. "I submit to Pope Leo XIV, His Holiness. I will do what he wants," right? Where in the meantime, you might say Gandalf is like the ambassador or you might say that he's like the trad influencers who maintain the faith, and is reminding Leo and others, hey, you got to come back to tradition, because Gandalf tries to restore, his whole effort is to restore Aragorn to his role as king of Gondor, as king of Minas Tirith, right? Where you have, that's not the case here with what Marshall's doing. All these guys want to do, seemingly, says, well, just give us our Latin Mass, right? They're not necessarily fighting to have the king come back. It might seem like it, right? Maybe, the thinking might go, okay, well, if we get more Latin Masses, we get more nice vestments, eventually over time, the Novus Ordo Church will die, and we're only going to have enough clergy to elect a trad. Well, I mean, okay, maybe like in 100 years. I mean, do you think modernists are going to allow a situation to arise where they're going to be thrown out of the city, of the church? No, this is what Francis did by appointing 120 of the electors. Not all of them were extreme radical liberals, right? Some of them were moderate liberals, you might say, but even the conservatives are dying out, right? Even the conservative liberals are dying out. So again, let's go back to the example. Again, we have here Francis, Ratzinger, Prevost, right? The church is occupied. They are illegal. They are squatters. This is not a just situation. This is unjust. This is unjust what's going on here. And again, traditional Catholicism has been driven out, forced to live outside the structures of the church, outside the boundaries of the city, just like what happened to our Lord. He was driven out of the synagogue, or driven out of the temple, excuse me, by the Sanhedrin. They said, "Don't come back here. You're not allowed to come back." So they, the religious authorities at the time, said, "Don't come back to the temple. Don't come back to the visible bounds of what the church is. You are outside the covenant." So they drove him out, and thinking they were doing something that was right, but they were not. And again, that's the excommunication of Lefebvre, the excommunication of Vigano. They're driving out those who stand for tradition from the perimeters of the kingdom. And we have here Bishop Sanborn, who's also was a follower of Lefebvre for a time, and who is now continuing the traditional fight with his own view on the church that says that these are occupants to an extent. They're legally the occupants, but they are not actually traditional in that they don't have the faith. So therefore, they're defecting from the intention to uphold the faith itself. So if you look into Bishop Sanborn, he's out of Pennsylvania at the moment. Spent a lot of decades in Michigan with a lot of faithful here, and who have fond memories of him too. So someone who's battled to keep the faith outside, again, the visible structures, if you will, of the church. And does this bother us? Does this matter? Well, no, it shouldn't. As Lefebvre said, I'm bringing up here a quote. He said this: to stay inside the church, or to put oneself inside the church, what does that mean? Firstly, he said, this is Lefebvre talking, what church are we talking about? If you mean the Conciliar Church, then we who have struggled against the council for 20 years, we who would have to re-enter this Conciliar Church in order to supposedly make it Catholic, that is a complete illusion. So when I read that, I'm thinking, okay, those who want to go back in to the city, the occupied city of Minas Tirith under these usurpers, you're going to think that you're just going to have some freedom. Maybe you're going to be free to say some things. Well, you got a lot of enemies in there, right? So again, the church is actually outside of this institution. As Lefebvre says here, we have been told, quote, that it is necessary for tradition to enter the visible church. He says, I think this is a very, very serious mistake. Don't go back in with these modernists. This is a false institution. Do not accept a deal with them. In other words, he's saying, where is the visible church? He asks. The visible church is recognized by the signs she has always given for her visibility. She is one, holy, Catholic, and apostolic. This is a very, very important point. This next slide. I ask you, where are the true marks of the church? Are they more in the official church? In other words, in the city of Minas Tirith, the occupied institution there under these usurpers? Or in us, he says, we who are outside the occupied city, those who are outside the visible church, the diocesan structures, the diocesan seminaries, etc. He says, it is clear that it is we who keep the unity of the faith, those who cling to it, he says, which has disappeared from the official church. Where is the unity of faith in Rome? It is we who have kept it. He says it's us who, although we've been driven out of this city, of this institution, of this church, we still maintain that. We have the marks of the church. This church, so-called, does not have the marks of the church, one holy, Catholic, apostolic. He says, quote, it is we who have the marks of the visible church. These signs are no longer found in others, in this imposter city. There is no longer the unity of faith in them, and it is the faith that is the basis of all visibility of the church. This is a very important theological point His Excellency is making, and we cannot forget it because, again, those who are worried about having the appearance of being outside the church, again, they are falling for the lie that, we have to get back into this occupied city to be Catholic. No, we have not left the church. We're maintaining the faith. We've been driven out. And so we maintain that faith as vagabonds, as rangers, living out here, trying to make unity as best we can, trying to find those who are like-minded in this battle and trying to survive out here on as best as we can without a sort of head of our different tribes. And that's very, very important for us to remember. And so the question then becomes, well, how do we reinstate the king? How do we fight this battle if we're all just spread about? If we can't get along, there's division in the trad movement. We're causing division. You're not seeing Vatican II for what it should be seen as. It's a big question mark. And again, there should be a decent amount of charity extended to everybody else who's out here trying to resolve this battle. And sometimes Twitter is where those battles are had. It's not always the best place. I'll happily admit that I've fallen prey to some of the nastiness on occasion. It's not always easy, but trying to keep a level head and charity is really, really important. So, I apologize if I've not lived up to that standard at times, but how do we answer this response? How do we react? Well, what I'll tell you, I think we don't do is what, again, Trad Inc. is doing. Again, we're not attacking persons here. We are attacking principles and ideas. Again, charity towards all persons, right? I know there's probably a lot of viewers who are on this show or have seen my episodes in the past who are saying, Stephen, you're being uncharitable. Others are not where you're at. How dare you call people who've been in this fight not traditionalists? Again, this is not a battle over persons. It's a battle over positions. And, as men, those of us who are, we have to fight for what we believe in. We're going to be held accountable for what we say on Judgment Day, right? And we're going to have to lose friends, as I have and others have, over for what we say. But that's fine because our Lord's lost friends too. And I think so. You could say Trad Inc.'s strategy is to, again, keep quiet and to not cause too much problems. Again, here is a scene from the movie when one of these Nazguls was hunting after the hobbits, and he was trying to get the ring, in other words, and trying to take it from them. You might even say this is the ring is like the faith, or you could say the ring is canonical regularization. And the Vatican imposters are trying to take away, or rather to bring those trad communities into its orbit in order to prevent others from going to the true king who's out there living as a ranger, as a vagabond. And he's trapping them. The Vatican is trapping them with regularization. Oh, you'll say the Latin Mass, whatever you want. Go to Institute of Christ the King, go to FSSP, etc. But, here, you have to accept Vatican II in light of tradition. You have to accept the reforms of the council. You can't say that the Novus Ordo Mass is anything other, is better than the Latin Mass and the extraordinary form of the Mass, so-called. You can't go against and say the Novus Ordo is invalid or things like this, right? That collegiality, where it really wasn't a bad thing, you have to read it in light of tradition. Well, in fact, reading that all in light of tradition condemns the entirety of the council, right? In any case, the policy of the hobbits, the Trad Inc. community, has been to zip it. Shh, don't speak too loudly, right? We don't want to get the Nazgul on our bad side. He's really going to get after us, right? So we don't want to ruffle too many feathers. Maybe the Nazgul can give us some help, actually. We need to be nice to these modernist usurpers. We need to not call out their errors, because if we do, they might take away the Latin Mass. We might have to be kicked out of the city. We might have to be scavengers and out there fighting the elements and be on our own. I mean, come on. That does not seem to be the right strategy. In fact, we need a counter-revolutionary traditional movement. This is what we were talking about in our previous show. This is what King Aragorn, as the ranger, discovered his strength. He found, again, his strength, his courage to fight back, and he enlisted the help of the army of the past. And you might say these are some of those voices standing up at this moment with the king for traditional Catholicism to do battle against those who are not fighting this war appropriately, who just want to keep quiet, who want to make peace with the imposters and the squatters who have no right to be in the city, in the church, in the ministerial occupied city. So again, we have here from right to left, Catholic Esquire, Father Nix, Dr. Mazza, Kevin Davis, Mario Dirksen, Mel Gibson from his movie The Patriot, Liz Yor, Archbishop Vigano, Louis Vecchio, myself, WM Review sponsoring Aragorn's Vestments, Canon 212, The Sword, that's out there every day putting out great content. And again, there's others. There's so many others that just really can't fit on the slide, guys. So don't be offended. There's so many people who are fighting in this fight. And again, it's hard to find unity here because you're going to find not just on this slide, but in the larger movement. Again, there are people who've been in this movement, trads, who are on the grassroots of this battle for decades. I've met many of them over the past 15 years since I came to tradition and started understanding and came to Latin Mass. We don't speak for ourselves today, okay? This program, Kokx News, we're not speaking for ourselves. There are fields of faithful Catholics all over the world, plenty of churches on the grassroots level fighting the good fight in independent chapels, in SSPX resistance chapels, in the SSPX too. There's a lot of good, faithful priests in the SSPX who are maintaining the line. Again, as well as other places. It's hard, we're not trying to draw. What we want is to say, again, there are people at different areas of this revolution coming along at different paces. Some people are just a little far behind. Okay, they're at the back of this fight, but they see the fight for tradition, and we need to again keep them as allies. Let's bring them up to the front of this battle and be a frontline crusader. And so here's like the last couple slides here. And again, thanks for watching today. If you like the show, click the like button, follow us, subscribe to us on YouTube as well as Rumble. Make a donation if you want. Go to the show notes. You can go to my Substack blog, or if you make a one-time donation, you can go to buymeacoffee.com/Stephen Kokx. That's in the show notes too. So we really appreciate that. Or send us a super thanks. That's awesome if you do that. If not, just again, keep us in your prayers. It takes a lot of time to put these slideshows and these shows together. So we hope you'll support us in whatever way you can. But here I think is something that we need to take advice from. This is a man called Louis Vuillot. He lived he was a Frenchman living in the 1800s, and he was a counter-revolutionary then. He was a conservative fighting the liberals in the 1800s who wanted to reconcile with the modern revolution, who wanted to reconcile with the modern liberal age. You could say he was fighting those who Cardinal George from Chicago, who passed, I think, 10 years ago or so, at one point said the church should be indebted to them. Okay, so Cardinal George was my old boss. For those who don't know, I worked for the Archdiocese of Chicago when I was in grad school at Loyola from 2009 to 2010. And so again, the ideas that Benedict Ratzinger said that we needed to revise from Pius IX's syllabus of errors, those men who opposed that, Louis Vuillot was opposing them. Louis Vuillot was a staunch trad back in the day, you might say. And this is taken from his book, The Liberal Illusion. He said, imagine a king deposed from his throne, the last best hope of his conquered fatherland, who was suddenly to declare that he considered himself justly deposed, and that he only aspired to enjoy his personal possessions, according to the laws governing all citizens, beneath the protection of the very men who were plundering his subjects. Vuillot goes on. The king, we would imagine, would disgrace himself in vain. No one would believe him. Those to whom he offered to sell his rights and his honor would tell him, are you mad? You are king. It's a fitting, perfect analogy for what we're talking about here today. The church at the moment is occupied by squatters who ran a revolution at Vatican II, and they have no right to be there. They do not have the right to tell trads what to do. Tradition has all the rights. Error has no rights. To rectify this situation, as Bishop Schneider recently said, he said it is a matter of justice that the Latin Mass be restored and liberalized. Well, it's a matter of justice that Leo and the rest of the modernists in this church, this occupying church, be driven out and the king be restored. That's true justice, right? Seeking coexistence with those who plundered this institution, the Church of Christ, the Bride of Christ, and who now sit as persons who prevent the return of the king to his throne. That's not a whole lot of justice to me. That doesn't seem to be a noble goal, in fact. Traditional Catholicism and restoring it to its rightful place as counter-revolutionaries, not going along with the revolution, not seeking peace, not shaking hands with these revolutionaries. That's our goal. That's what we need to do. That's our new strategy here, right? To seek approval of heretics and squatters is not Catholic. to coexist in this occupied city, this imposter Minas Tirith, to live at the lower levels, to just happily have our side chapel, to have our little Latin mass. That's not justice. That's shameful, actually. That's to betray the Catholic faith. Imagine King Aragorn in the movies just saying to Denethor, okay, sure, yeah, I'll just live under you. You're not, you're kind of crazy, but, maybe how about you just let me and my wife, Eowyn, live peacefully down here at the bottom while you just snack and have Pippin sing songs to you up in the hall that I'm supposed to be in. I don't think that's not a kingly thing to do, as Louis Vuitton just said. And moreover, this imposter town, this imposter church has everybody else doing whatever they want. We just saw the LGBT pilgrimage take place in Rome, right? James Martin, the Rainbow Mafia, the Crusade for LGBT. They marched in, and Leo said, "Hey, that's okay. I'll even meet with your leader, James Martin. We'll have a photo op together. Come up to the king, to the King's Hall. We'll show you around. We'll put you out on social media." It's not very much to be one of many in the Conciliar Zoo. Even if you're the king, to be put in a cage is not where you belong. You belong out in the top of this church, of this city. You have the rights. Error has no rights. This is an imposter situation. They have no right to be where they are. So that's the show today, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for tuning in. I hope this helped hope you understand where we're at and why we need to do what we're doing, and to continue to call out those who are occupying these positions, who are illegal occupants, and preventing the restoration of the King of the Catholic faith to its rightful spot on the throne. Thank you for watching, everybody, today, and God bless.